Ben from Cal Protocol to tell us how to build backend data infrastructure with Dune API. So Ben is a pure mathematician, so I'm told, a vegetarian, a brewer, a gardener, and a cyclist. So let's get it up for Ben.
Well, there we go. Well, hello everyone. It looks like we've got some great turnout. There's a few seats over here. I'm really excited to share with all of you some cool things that we've been doing at Cal Protocol. You won't have to hear too much of a spiel about us at Cal Protocol, but we have been building a lot of general purpose tooling that is available in our GitHub and production ready for people to use today. So this is partially a workshop, although we will kind of go through everything for maybe half the time, and then you'll have an opportunity to try it out for yourself. Please take note, you will need a Dune API key in order to actually interact with the workshop material. And if you don't already have one, they are giving them out at the back. Sean, in the blue shirt, is ready to give out some API keys. So, title of our talk today, Building Backend Data Infrastructure with Dune API. And quick agenda. The first really cool thing is that we already have a Python client ready for using the Dune API. It's published on PyPy. You can use it today. We're going to look at a few use cases and existing projects that we use in our regular, everyday services at Cal Protocol, specifically a query monitoring alert system and something else called solver rewards. Just a heads up, the solver rewards has not yet been ported to the new Dune API, although it will be very soon. And so this is just another example of some existing projects that are live in production and help make our lives easier at Cal Protocol. And finally, step 3, we'll have an opportunity to try it out. So let's get right in there. The Python client, there's not that much to say because it is super easy to use. Pip install Dune client, and this is just a sample script that you can use to fetch some data from a query that you have already. You import query, so it's all fully typed as well. The types are there, query parameters, the Dune client, and a query struct. Give it a query ID, and whatever parameters you want. This is an example of all 4 different parameter fields, a text field, a number field, a date field, and an enum field. Put whatever values you want. There's nothing super special about this query. You can Dune.refresh the client itself really just takes the API key, give it a query, refresh. So this is pretty much how easy it is to use to start fetching data or pulling it directly from Dune via the API. There's a link here to probably the GitHub repo. All right, so let's look at some use cases and existing projects. A lot of this is focused entirely on automation. I mean, building services and cron jobs that you can do that fetch some information from Dune that's relevant to you and doing a thing. So Dune Alerts is really just the Dune API integrated with Slack so that you can periodically refresh a parameterized query and determine if there's something unusual you'd like to be alerted about and post an alert to Slack. Part of the workshop today is there's still some cute open issues that are fun to do. This doesn't necessarily need to be a Slack bot. It could be any of email, Telegram, or wherever you'd like to be alerting. In fact, it doesn't just need to be alerts about things that are bad. You could set up a query monitor for your own marketing team and making tweets about stuff related to your protocol. For example, we'll probably set up a Dune alert that for when Cal Protocol reaches 100 billion in trading volume, so that we don't have to sit around and watch it and wait for it to happen. It will just automatically post whatever tweet we want when the time comes. Second is solver rewards. This is similar as well. Same focus on automation. It's the Dune API in combination with formerly known as the Gnosis Safe, now just Safe, plus also this sort of Slack bot. And what this does is pulls a whole lot of information from Dune, sort of aggregates it together via a script, transforms this into what's called a transfer file. It's basically setting out, it's an automated payment system. We reimburse our solvers every week, some ether for gas costs and some cow tokens for rewards based on like their activity operating the cow protocol. This transfer file is proposed as a transaction to the team safe account, and then the only thing really, it sends some sort of a message saying there is a transaction requiring the team's approval. The team follows a link, checks the results, and signs this transaction and executes it. So this is more or less a fully automated process at this point, and all with the power of Dune API. Dune Alerts is a general purpose production ready package that can be used today. Any of you can use it, and it's super easy to use. Monitoring on-chain activity, detecting malicious behavior, automating data-driven tweets. And I think it's pretty important for decentralized protocols such as ours, especially those where, with scalability issues that we see today in Ethereum, we can't really put all of the rules of the game directly into the smart contract because it's too gas intensive to verify. A lot of people in the Ethereum community has moved more towards sort of DAO-based ruling systems. And so, for example, the solvers on our protocol could act in a way that is not according to the rules that they are contractually bound to, but the smart contract itself can't do anything about it. So we need to detect these types of malicious behavior and be aware of it when it's happening. Be alerted when it's happening. A couple of cool examples here. There's a cow improvement proposal for fee subsidies. The cow DAO had given 60 ETH to subsidize fees for trading on our protocol. And so at some point, we'll need to know once those fees have been exhausted. Using Dune Analytics is a great place to get a really good estimation for like how much of these fees have actually been spent, because the calculation is non-trivial. Right. We don't need to look at the rest of those. I think we've pretty much covered that. So just an example of these alerts in production. Dune Alerts, unusual slippage. We detected 4 cases. Here's a link to the results of this query. Another one, this is one that's cool because alerts are meant to be acted upon. So we have here missing tokens detected. We've got somebody there responding, I'll create a PR for these. Here's a link to the PR, a little heart at the bottom. Crisis averted. There's a few different types for the query monitor. Something result threshold. So this is a situation where you don't necessarily want to see any results. And if you do see results from your query, this is an alert-worthy situation. So, or you can configure this to be more than n records. In the case of the missing tokens, our configuration parameter is 10. You have a counter based on any numerical column that's being returned. So this would be similar scenario to the 100 billion in trading volume, et cetera. And we're always looking for other ideas for different types of query monitors, so please feel free to contribute. And this is how easy it is to use. It doesn't really require anything except Docker, actually. You will create a configuration file, give it a name maybe, missing tokens. That's really, the name doesn't matter, it's just for the logs, a query ID, and some sort of a threshold. You'll have a few different environment variables, one of them being the Dune API key, which you definitely will need to use any of the stuff we're talking about today. Slack token, some channel that the post is supposed to go in. And then it is as easy as this cryptic stuff down here, Docker run. What you're doing is you're mounting the configuration volume into the Docker container with your query ID and the threshold, providing the environment variables like the Dune API key. And you're just running this container that's the cow protocol Dune Alerts container with the configuration file that you've mounted as a volume being passed in. Cool. So I think we've already kind of talked about solver rewards. We may not, let's not cover that today. Just as a note, I mean, this is another automated service that we run that depends very heavily on Dune. In fact, maybe we just take a look at this dashboard for a second. So there are several parameterized queries inside of this dashboard. And all of the results that are contained in all of these queries are actually pulled in a single, inside of a Python script, fetching all this information and sort of making joint or aggregating the information in a way that's maybe a little easier to do in Python than it is in SQL. And also it's a little easier to verify how all the pieces were put together. So they're all independent queries. So we make these API refresh calls with whatever parameters. Yeah. Anyway, how do we go back to this? Cool. There's a link there also to the project. This will soon be migrated to the new Dune API. So with that in mind, I'm not sure where we are for time here, but it is demo time. So if you've got your computer, all of this stuff can be executed today, and we've got like a nice little list of things. So you can head over to DuneCon workshop. That probably could have used a QR code. Oh wait, well you have to do this from a computer. So the only thing you really need is basic Python knowledge, and maybe not even that, especially to run the Dune alerts. A Dune API key, and a few things that can be done here. You can create your own alert query. So if you have any Dune query at all that you might want to set up into some sort of automated alert system, you can just already start with one of your own. You could fetch some data that you've been craving to aggregate and try that. Or, I mean, we're also looking, if you have any new ideas for query monitor types, I'd be happy to add them, or you can add them yourselves. And there's an open issue in the Dune alerts to sort of generalize this Slack alert to either Telegram, Twitter, email, or anything you can think of, really, because all it really needs is a post message. So, I mean, I guess that's the end of the slides. We can head over to the workshop code. But before that, I just want to let you know that we're definitely also hiring. We're doing pretty cool stuff with Dune Analytics at Cal Protocol, and we'd be happy to receive an application. Let's take a look at this here. So let me make this a little bigger, maybe, like that. So really, all you need to have is some Python. I think this is probably a little bit more involved than it needs to be, but this is generally how you would set up any sort of Python project that uses the Dune client. Set up a virtual environment. In this particular case, you would just install the requirements that are here in the project. This is the Dune client and python.env, which is really just used to load your API key from an env file. And we've got a few demo scripts here. Number one, basic fetch, is the query that you saw a screenshot for right at the very beginning when it was just showing the different types of query parameters. We've got something called data modeling. This is actually a cute query that I haven't managed. There seems to be a bug in this query. So if you want for the workshop, feel free to help me debug that. I migrated it to the V2 engine recently, and it doesn't seem to agree. But this query, if you're familiar with Balancer V2, you can provide a pool contract address and the staking contract that is associated with that pool. You run that query, and you will see all of the accounts that hold staked and unstaked balances in that LP token. So it's kind of cute if you're interested. There we go. So an example of data modeling really is just what you get back from the Dune API is a dictionary of sort of column names and values, a list of dictionaries, which is pretty good structure. But so data modeling, what we mean by data modeling here is sort of having an actual like object that you can work with in Python. So it's a combination of the query fetching and sort of constructing real objects out of the results. And finally, we've got number 3, 4, and 5 and 6 are all different configuration files for the alert system. So you can see, I think there's an example of everything. So this one is a volume, it's an amount threshold. So you specify a column name and an amount for which, if the value returned is ever less than this, you would alert. There's this one. This is an example of a windowed query. So you can run something like this every 24 hours, and it will query for the previous day and like in a time window between start time and end time. And this is just demonstrating how you can pass some query parameters into the configuration file. And the only one that I think isn't actually here, unfortunately, is a left-bounded query, which is from a certain period until now. So you have a windowed query for like bounded intervals. You have something that's left-bounded from a certain point in time forward, and you have a few different types of things that you can build your query alerter on. And this is available for anyone to use anytime they'd like. Note that you can run all of these scripts right now, but you may not have a Slack bot configured already. So the nice thing about this is that it will really do everything. It will get right up to the point where it realizes it needs to make alert, and then the program will crash. So you will see everything that you're expecting to see. And there's a little link here if you want to create your own Slack bot. And there's this open issue to generalize this, if you like. And if you guys don't, I probably will soon. That's about it from what I had planned to talk about. If there are any questions, comments, concerns, I don't know how much time we've actually got left here. Sorry? Back there, guy in the blue shirt. Email API@dune.com and request your API key today.
Thanks. Yeah, another question. I don't know where. Does it work? Test, test. No. I think you can all hear me. The deployment of the alerts actually, does this happen on the Dune side, or do you have to deploy that container with the stuff inside yourself?
Right, so all of this is stuff that we've done independently of Dune. I think that Dune is now in their documentation referring to this client as like the Python client. Is that true? I'm not sure. But the Dune alerts is just really, yeah, you would configure your own. The way we do this is in our own Kubernetes, our own production servers.
Cool. Gotcha, thanks.
Yes, right over there. Yep. Right, so within the
Can you repeat the question to make sure that...
Yes, so the question was about the parsing of the response data into a data class, right, in the script, and whether we use something generic or, well... Right. Yeah, so inside the Dune client itself, the type that we return is a list of Dune record, and Dune record is just a dictionary string. So when it comes to any sort of object relational mapping and parsing that response, you can always expect to be getting a dictionary of string, or JSON really. And there are probably some libraries out there that make it very easy to deserialize this directly into your data class structure. I don't know, I don't generally import too many packages, so I usually just parse it myself and write a from dict method for each of them. There's definitely something more elaborate you could be doing. Cool. So, if there are no more questions, I guess that's about all we have to say today. Thanks for your attendance, and I hope that you find some of this stuff useful. We will be maintaining both of these projects in the Cow Protocol GitHub, and you're more than welcome to contribute, and we're always and submit as many feature requests and bugs as you want as well. Thanks again.
Thank you, Ben. Thanks for a great talk. I wish I brought my laptop to try out all these cool things. I definitely saw a few interesting use cases with how to build backend infrastructure with the Dune API. All right, so up next, we have 2 talks in separate stages. So here we'll have a workshop on Dune Spellbook with our very own Meghan. And then in the main stage, we'll have trends in crypto using Dune data. But before that, we'll have a quick break, go use the restroom, go get some water, and then we'll be back here in about 5 minutes to start our talk on Dune Spellbook.
check.
hello. Welcome back to the breakout room stage. How are we feeling? Nice, nice, nice. Are we ready to learn how to become a wizard by doing spells? Lovely, lovely. So up next, we have our very own Meghan from Dune, who basically named the spell book. So this is going to be a very interactive session, so pull up your laptop and let's get going with the spells.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Meghan Heintz. I'm the matriarch of Spellbook. I'm super, super excited to be here because I know, from context clues, just by being in this room, you guys are some of the brightest minds in blockchain analytics. And our job at Dune, as our CEO so eloquently put this morning, is really to just build tools to make you more and more powerful data scientists, analysts. And I know as a data scientist that a really fundamental tool in your toolbox is being able to build and collaborate and maintain and create new views and tables. And that is exactly what Spellbook is for. So you may have noticed when you were walking in, there was a fairly long list of prerequisites for this workshop. I don't want you to fuss, though, because we have lots of people here to help you. All of our workshop elves are going to raise their hands right now, so you know where they are. So if you run into any issues, just lock eyes with them, and they will come running to help you. And this is going to be an interactive session, so definitely, I see many of you already have your laptops out, so that's good. But I always think it's good to start a workshop with kind of understanding where everyone is in their data journey. So I want you to raise your hands if you've ever queried either DEX trades or NFT.trades. Cool. Everybody. And how many of you knew that Spellbook or Abstractions, the previous version of this project, is where those tables were created? Okay. Still the majority of you. And how many people have successfully contributed to either of those projects? Oh, that's actually more than I thought. Okay, great, great, great. So that's very exciting. I'm hoping that we can go on this journey together and everyone will be able to raise their hand for that last question as soon as possible. So Spellbook, previously called Abstractions, is our Web3 community data transformation project. So I'm sure all of you are aware of the terms ETL and ELT, and T, transformation, is what we're doing in Spellbook. We've made this big maturation of our project by converting our repo into a DBT project, data build tool, and DBT is basically an open source analytics framework that tries to take kind of the best practices from software engineering and bring them into analytics engineering. And what I mean by that is now we have dead simple data quality tests we can add in like essentially a single line of code. We have some maybe slightly more complicated but incredibly useful unit tests that we can write on our models and our queries. We can now do materialization in a simple configuration block rather than writing kind of these increasingly complex P-SQL functions and cron jobs that you can actually test yourselves. All you'll actually be writing is select statements and then defining your materializations simply in a few lines. We also have auto-generated lineage or dependency graphs, which maybe wasn't so clear on the other wizard side, but it's kind of a big headache for us on V1 because we had these complicated mind maps of the order that we had to deploy things in, and now that's all managed automatically for us by DBT. We also have automatically generated documentation. I'm sure if you've been writing code for any amount of time, you've written an errant comment in a file knowing that it was incredibly important, but no one was going to see it because it was trapped in a comment statement. That can now be written into the documentation that can be rendered in some fairly beautiful UI as close as possible to the code itself. And we also are implementing Jinja templating and macros, which means we can write much more elegant and modular SQL code rather than having to copy the same thing over and over again. We can do interesting things like write for loops and define variables. So a lot of exciting stuff when we've upgraded from Abstractions to Spellbook. So today, we're going to do a couple things. We're going to set up DBT, and our workshop elves are going to be incredibly helpful to you in that process. We're going to learn how to migrate a spell, And then my colleague Thomas is going to tell us a little bit about our newly launched labels project. Cool. So we're going to do these prereqs. I'm going to go through them fairly quickly, but then we're going to take a little bit of a break while everyone catches up. Raise your hand if you need help from an elf, and then give me a thumbs up if you've gotten through everything. We'll kind of wait until most people have a thumbs up, and if at the end you're still kind of stuck on something, you're going to get cozy with one of your neighbors and make a friend and follow along with them, and we will help you after the workshop. So I'm sure most of you, but some of you may not have already gotten with it, so you've got to sign up for GitHub, but also set this up locally, including authenticating between Git and GitHub. You have to fork our repo and clone it locally and kind of load it up in the IDE of your choice. VS Code is a nice one. I'm personally a PyCharm person. Alan laughed at me when I said that yesterday, so maybe I'm the only PyCharm person. But use whatever you feel most comfortable with. Then we will set up the DBT prerequisites, which includes installing Python 3. If you have not installed Python before, grab a workshop elf now, and they will sit with you and help you get that done. Install pip, install pipenv. Pip is our Python package installer, and pipenv is the virtual environment manager that we selected for this project. Then we will set up DBT. So we'll do that by installing the virtual environment for this project using pipenv install from the root of Spellbook, the repo that you have just cloned. We'll open the virtual environment with pipenv shell, and then we'll set up DBT with dbt init, which helps define the project YAML file that you will need to run this project. And I'm going to give you the link for all these slides when we get to the break, so don't worry too much if we're going fast through this. dbt init, we're doing something a little funky with this because we're kind of half setting up the project because unfortunately we cannot give all of you direct access to our database. So when you go through this setup, there's going to be a few placeholders and a few things that you have to do. So we're working with the Databricks database, but for host, you can put whatever you want. I just put a period as a place marker, HD path, same thing, token, same thing. But for schema, you must use the schema wizard because we're doing some kind of magic on the back end with that. And then threads, the same thing, doesn't matter. So just make sure you use wizard as a schema and use whatever placeholders you want for host, HTTP path, and tokens. After you do that, you're going to run dbt compile. Just make sure that that succeeds and gives you this done message. And then you're going to ensure that that has created a new directory for yourself called target. This is going to contain your compiled SQL. So later we're going to write some SQL plus some Jinja, and this is going to convert it back to plain SQL for you. Don't run dbt debug. That's checking your database connection. You don't have a database connection, so it will fail. Cool. These are the slides. We're going to take a little break right now as we set this up, and all of our colleagues are going to help you do that. So just let me know, give me a thumbs up when you're done with this setup, and then we'll continue the presentation. If anyone, oh wait, I've been turned off. Okay, and don't be shy. Please ask our workshop elves if you have any questions. Is it right there? Also, if you're a pro and you've finished the setup, please give me a thumbs up. 0 thumbs. Thank you, Claudia. Say no. It doesn't matter, because you don't actually have a connection to the database anyway. Yeah, yeah. Check some other tables. How's your table, Andrew? People do it? Are you set up on Spellbook? You're set up on, did you? Did you set it up? He's gonna help you. Hi, I'm Megan. Nice to meet you. Oh, we were. Oh, wow. It's so funny. No one had like the cameras on. Oh my God, I can't believe it was a year ago. All right. Nothing. You can put a period. 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 And then it doesn't matter, 1 or 2. We're not actually connecting to the database, so it doesn't matter. All right, if you've got a question about Unity catalog, it doesn't matter because you're not connecting to the database, so you can just add placeholders for that as well. Cool. How is everyone feeling? Can I get thumbs up from people who are done or almost done? Okay, maybe 30%. Should we wait a few more minutes? Yeah? Okay. Cool. Everyone, if you're not finished, this is the time where you have to get cozy with one of your neighbors that did finish. So, good friend-making opportunity. Does that sound good? All right, we're going to try to actually build a spell now. So we're going to do a migration because we all already know SQL super well. We are just going to take something that was already written and convert it into DBT. So I've selected view balances from Balancer. I tried to be kind of egalitarian and pick a random project so I wasn't showing too much favoritism. And this is the one that I landed on. You can find the V1 version under deprecated Dune V1 abstractions, Ethereum Balancer, view balances. Either navigate to that in your locally cloned repo or on github.com. And then we're going to go back into Spellbook and set up a file structure. So you're going to add a project folder for Balancer, and then underneath that, Ethereum. So we're going to do all chain work in the chain directories, and all cross-chain work lives in the main project repo, or project directory. Then we're going to create 3 empty files, one being your spell file, so balancer ethereum balances.sql, balancer ethereum schema.yaml, which is kind of where you're going to describe what your spell is doing, and then a balancer ethereum sources YAML, which is going to describe the dependencies that your model has. So the first step is super easy, just copy and paste. So copy the old abstraction, paste it into the new file you created, balancer ethereum balances.sql. The next step is also pretty simple, just deleting stuff. So we're going to delete everything out of that file that is not the selector, in this case, a with statement. So drop materialize view, create, index, all that stuff can go away. We're going to handle that later in a very simple dictionary, basically. Next thing is a little annoying, but we did move from Postgres to Spark SQL, so we have to make some syntax changes. I think they're going to be fairly simple for this particular query. So the first thing is just removing double quotes around table names, replacing double quotes around reserved keywords with backticks, and replacing the /x with 0x, and lowercasing the addresses. Also later in the query, there is some syntax for generating a series of dates. In Spark SQL, this just becomes explode sequence. So I think that is all the changes you're going to have to make in this query, but Boxer has written up a very nice, comprehensive overview of all the changes between PostgreSQL and Spark SQL. So also, because we are a workshop and we're running short on time, you can speed up your SQL test by using event transfer sample instead of the full event transfer table. I would recommend doing that. And then once you've made those syntax updates, which should be relatively quick, what you're going to do is just copy that SQL and run it on Dune.com and just make sure it runs, make sure the data looks good. We'll maybe give you like a couple of minutes to do that, and then we will continue on and show you the actual DBT components of this. Whoever has the query running fastest is going to get a small prize, so you should code quickly. Is anyone ready for their prize? Did anyone run the query? All right, I guess I'm going home with the Dune coffee.
Hello, hello. Sorry to interrupt the intense competition to get there. Just a quick announcement. On the main room, we're going to have a wizard panel to talk about their career journeys in about 5 minutes. So you're free to check that out if you want to. And we'll still be here to work through our spells. Awesome.
There was some assistance, but we do have a winner. Okay, cool. Now we're going to do the actual DBT component of this. If you don't have your query running at this point, that's all right. We can just talk through this. So this is the first time we're introducing Jinja into our spell. But all of our tables we're going to replace with sources. So you've got your curly bracket to denote a Jinja block, and then a source with the schema and table name. So we're just replacing all of our tables with this. A source is just any table that is not made in Spellbook. So you're not referring to anything else we created in this table or in this repo. You have to define your sources in a YAML file. If you're using a commonly used table like Ethereum transactions or something like that, it's definitely already defined. But if you're using probably a decoded table from your project, you're probably going to have to define that yourself. This is kind of like as much work as you want to do on it. There's bare minimum where you just have to say what the schema is in the table name, but you can also go ham on this and write really nice descriptions of the table on all the columns. You can define source freshness tests, which is kind of an extra layer of security that guarantees your data is up to date. And you can also write custom tests against these sources. A nice thing about contributing to this is this automatically goes into our documentation, which has this kind of nice little UI created by DBT. So this is also the place where you might be able to say you're the contributor or write a nice little ad for your project describing what it's doing. At this point, you would run dbt compile again and check for really common errors like missing a source or kind of like a simple YAML syntax error. We don't do this in the spell, but if that query had referenced another abstraction or spell, you would use something called a ref, because there's two different ways to refer to tables. And a ref is just another file in the Spellbook project. In this instance, I kind of just pulled out one of the CTEs, put it in its own file, and then I can refer to it simply by the file name. But you don't need to do this to complete the spell. This is just kind of something you should know about. And then we're kind of like in the end of this process. So we're really just defining the alias, which is the name of the table, the schema, and the materialization. So back when we deleted all that like index stuff and create materialized view, all we're doing to replace that is this single line materialized view. If you had wanted to make a table, it would just say table. If you want to make incremental, it would say incremental, and there'd be a few more digit blocks throughout the SQL query, but it's a little more complicated, so I won't get into that today. Generally speaking, best practices, always try to build a view first, because then you're guaranteed to have up-to-date data. There's no lag between updating your table or materializing it anywhere. So always start with a view, but if we need better performance, we can work with you to create tables or incremental tables. And then we just define what we did. So we add our table to our schema file, we write our nice description, we give ourselves a pat on the back by adding ourselves to the contributors section, and then we can also add tests with a single line of code by just adding in tests and the name of the test we're going to run. DBT ships with a bunch of generic tests like checking for null values, checking for uniqueness, key relationships between tables and accepted values. We're writing new generic tests, which Jeff has contributed to, that are very specific to our domain. So it's going to be very simple to really improve and guarantee the data quality of your work. Again, you would run dbt compile because you've added YAML. And then you would go to the target file, which is going to take all your SQL that you've added gingerblocks to and turn it back into SQL. And you can just double check that it's still running by pasting it into DuneCon and running it. This is kind of a wart, and we're going to remove this imminently. But to make your table or view visible on the Dune Data Explorer, you're going to write a quick little set table properties snippet inside this file called alter table properties. I think we're going to replace this in the next 2 weeks, so I hesitate to show you something so ugly. When you open this table or this file, you'll see how long it is. But we are always improving this process, so don't worry too much about it. At that point, you're ready to just push your code and open a pull request. And my man JDude will help you out. That's it. You can celebrate. You've done it. Just in summary, we set up some prereqs. So we got Git and GitHub set up. We set up Python, pitinf. We made our file structure with our SQL schema and source files. We converted everything into a Spark SQL select statement. We used some gingerblocks to define sources. We defined the name or alias of our table in a simple configuration block, our schema in the DBT project YAML. We defined a materialization, in this case a view. We didn't have to write a crazy pSQL function in cron job. We added a simple test, and we made a pull request, and one of you will be merged, and that's it. You're an arch wizard. You're the most powerful wizards on Dune. We are obviously all worked on the same query. So I think in about a week and a half, we're going to go through all of your pull requests, and whoever gave us the best pull request is going to get merged in, and we're going to send you a nice little prize. So At first, we thought maybe we'll do the person who gets it in first, but then we realized that's not really the type of work we want to incentivize, because we want people to do thoughtful, useful work. So we're giving you a week and a half to finish this. We can tweet out the more details about that after this. But at this point, I'm going to pass this over to Thomas to talk about labels.
Hi everyone. Yeah, I just wanted to take this opportunity and to talk about spells. And one of the cool things we've done lately is we just launched the very first version of labels on Dune v2. For now, it just includes centralized exchanges, some funds, some top NFT traders, and some other things, but those are more examples for you to get inspired from and hopefully help us get a lot more labels in there. So we kind of need your help to test it a bit, give us feedback, add some labels yourself. If you ever have some queries with a lot of addresses, well, you can now take them, add it to labels really quickly. And that will help the community and us, and that will just help us. So how to use it? You just basically use the get labels function in any of your queries, and instead of the address, you will get the labels associated with that address. And what's cool is on v2, labels are actually spells. So since you all know how to build spells, you can also build labels. We have two types of labels mainly. You have static labels, which are basically lists of addresses, pairs of addresses and names that you can just manually enter. And then we have query labels that are basically based on spells. So you use spells to create new labels. And so both are super useful. And it's kind of a cool circle, because the more spells we build on Dune, the more labels we are going to have, and the more query labels we are going to have. So we can have some kind of an intuitive feeling of what addresses are doing and what their activity and stuff. So yeah, I just kind of wanted to ask you all to come to me and contribute to labels and help us and give us your feedback. What's next for labels? Well, more labels. We're going to also try and customize the get labels function, and hopefully do some cool educational content on how to use labels to make your dashboards look better, hopefully. Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
We're going to be around, so if you're still working, we're here to answer your questions.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. All right, so we've learned about how to do spells. We've also learned about how to do label. I'm going to actually try to step on this. So that's big step. So today we made a big step in becoming the arch wizards. Hopefully some of us will become arch wizards in the coming weeks. And then so next up, we are going to have a quick break. And then in about, hopefully, 3:55-ish, 4 p.m.-ish, I think. If I can read about this. Yeah, 4:55. We'll have another session back here. But up till then, we can either stay here to do more spells. We're free to mingle. Thanks, guys. Hello. Welcome back to the breakout stage. How are we doing after some dessert? Delicious tiramisu, cookies, chocolate? Yes? All right, thanks guys. So if you're looking to hear about how Lido creates analytics using Dune, you are in the right place. So next up, we'll welcome Greg and Irina to talk about how Lido uses Dune. Welcome.
Yeah? Oh, it's working. Yeah, hi folks. My name is Greg. I'm from Lido, and I work as data engineer. So basically, what I'm trying to do in Lido is recreate Dune in networks where Dune isn't presented yet. And also here today, my co-author, Irina Katunina. She's head of Lido analytic team, and basically the first analyst at Lido. So what Lido is? Lido is a liquid staking protocol. We operating in 5 different blockchains, and currently we have about 30% of all staked ETH with a total value locked about $7.6 billion. And today I'm going to present you how Lido team creates analytic on Dune, also some results of Dune API testing, and some conclusions. So let's start. Well, currently, Lido has been working with Dune for more than 20 months. During that time, we created a lot of queries, more than 500, and also 17 beautiful dashboards. But then it all started. Our analytic derived from community members, and here you can see the very first dashboard, which was created with widgets from Vasily Shapovalov, Anton Bukov, and LS Simas. And despite this dashboard provide like pretty comprehensive picture, demand for analytics rises with Lido growth. So in March 2021, the Lido analytic team was created. And currently what we do is creating different simulations and models of blockchain networks and DeFi protocols in order to provide data insights. We perform monitoring analytics, product analytics, system analytics, and recently we added also web analytics to our backlog. And for all these analytics, we need like a really wide range of data sources. And if Lido uses like conventional data engineering approaches, it would require a whole team of data engineers. So what we decided is to use third-party solutions where it's possible. So for us, Dune becomes such a solution on Ethereum and recently on Polygon. So what do we have? Oh, yeah, it's changed. Great. So our dashboards could be divided into several groups. We got like high-level analytics with general metrics of Lido on Ethereum. Also for our key lending and liquidity pools, we got separate dashboards. And also we got several special dashboards, including like LDO incentives, behavioral pattern analysis, and deposits to Beacon chain. And here you could scan like our recently released blog post with all our dashboards with detailed descriptions and links. So yeah, feel free to check them. And also don't check only them, also check like all dashboards from community members, because Dune community members does a really great job. And also, here's basically all about our analytic team. And next, I would describe like Dune API, how we work with it, and all that stuff. So you probably already know that Dune API allows you to execute and retrieve execution data directly from the code. And we've tested it for 1 month in 3 different use cases. So here's the link to Streamlit up. Yeah, also need to disclaimer here that we do not provide you with some libraries or modules. Here's the direct solutions of Lido-specific tasks. And I just created like a snapshot of this solution in order for you to also check them. So first use case is related to Aave liquidations. Aave is a liquid staking protocol. There you could use STETH as a collateral. And in some circumstances, this collateralized STETH might be liquidated. And we really would like to know which wallets are close to liquidation. In order to solve this task, you need to get list of all wallets which use STF as a collateral. And in order to do this, if you do it on-chain with just Web3, you have to pass through all deposit and transfer events, save all events with STF. After that, calculate balances like through transactions and save it somewhere. And this was really like time and execution consuming. We also tried different data providers, but we face many data bugs and incompleteness. So we basically always return to on-chain solution with that large amount of executions. But with Dune API, we solve it pretty fast. We just create simple query and download it, and that's all. So yeah, and here I could show you the result of it. We especially give you like whole code so you could read through it. And this deep node and all these graphs are made with Dune API data. So basically, you could find even functions which download needed data from Dune API, but API key is hidden because we don't want to spoil it. Yeah. So yeah, for our liquidation, that's all. Thanks to Dune API, we could track all the needed data about our collateralized STF. Second case is related to retention analysis. Due to peculiarities of like retention metrics, we could calculate it only for current day, but we wanted to know like dynamics of retention to understand if users are come to us or they dormant. And we basically don't have any solution how to calculate it in dynamics, but Dune API provided us with some solution. And in order to explain this solution, I need to dive deeply into how exactly Dune API works. 1 second, sorry. So you don't just pass query and get the result. Instead, the flow is following. You post query and get execution ID. After that, you check the status of execution. And once status is like executed successfully, you could download needed data and use it. Interesting part here is that knowing execution ID, you could download data anytime you wanted. So that's how we create a decision. We just make a small dictionary with date execution ID, and that was all. And basically, here you can see the result. So if I need retention metrics for this date, I just get retention snapshots. And I hope everything would run. Yeah, and get all needed data. So these data are not like hard-coded. It's all get from Dune API. So also I could get data for another date. And it's still, yeah, it's running, but still we get results with the graphs. So hooray, everything works. And the last use case, second. Oh, I'm unloading. Yeah, so the last use case is related to cross-chain analytics. Since Lido presented in 5 different chains, we wanted to know like general metrics in order to understand how it operates, what happened in different blockchains. But there are several challenges which you need to accomplish before creating cross-chain analytics. For us, these challenges was, firstly, you got 5 different blockchains, each with its own like passing parameter methods, different queries, different data structures. This info should be updated like on daily basis, and this is require complicated data engineering. And this data engineering entails infrastructure and pipeline maintenance. So yeah, we make like semi-automated scripts, but this was still like pretty bad for proper cross-chain analysis. And with Dune, we solved this task for 3 out of 5 blockchains. And yes, I will return. So here you could see, for example, a graph of all depositors among all Lido's blockchain, and also you could play with it, like display only, for example, Polkadot, or make some sizes, all that stuff, and also even download as PNG. So please feel free to play with all these graphs. Yeah, and we use here Dune API for Polygon, Solana, and Ethereum, and for Polkadot and Kusama, we use our own decision made on Prometheus. But hope someday we will use only Dune for this task, because with Dune it's really simple. You just make one API call. Yeah, and to sum up all of this, if you're a data analyst who don't want to mess with processing in data engineering, the Dune API could be really beneficial, because you don't have to read through documentation in order to understand how to pass parameter properly, bothering with storing data, or spend hours in cleaning and checking for errors. All you do is just create simple API call and go straight to data analytics. And also we got several suggestions to Dune. The first suggestion is to create like update execution method, which allows for queries which take a really lot of time to run at the first time, but after first run, this query could be updated like with several rows in order to not re-execute it every time, because especially for Solana, there are a lot of efforts and I suppose computational on Dune side for even, I don't know, for 1 week, because Solana produce enormous amounts of data, and also download query method for just basically fetching data from Dune frontend, because once again, there are a lot of queries which are already executed, so you might just take this data and use it. Yeah, and that's all from my part. I could go to maybe Streamlit tab, and if you have any questions, please ask them. And also, yeah, here you could see all the links to all the blog posts and more info about how, and when you should use it. Yeah, so that's all. Let me just. I really like this graph.
Thank you, Greg. It was a wonderful presentation. Thanks for helping us.
Yeah, and if we could left something on screen currently, I would left cross-chain TVL. But if needed, I could go back to thanks and Q&A.
Yeah, any questions for Greg? No, I guess everyone's like so awed by how awesome your analytics is and how awesome the API is. Thanks for helping Dune testing the API in the past month.
Yeah, great. So,
cool.
And
awesome.
if you would have questions like after this. Oh, and also I forget about analytics team. So remember, we're hiring. So if you're a cool data engineer, come to Irina and talk to her, because we need more data visits in Lido.
Nice, nice. Well, thank you, thank you. All right, awesome, awesome. So looks like we have some time between now and the next session. So up next here in the breakout stage, we have leveraging your data communities with one of the OG data educators, Andrew Hong. And then in the main stage, we'll have governance in data with Ivan from Gitcoin. So see you guys in a little bit.
Baby, you're just the way, just the way, just the way I like. You're just the way, just the way, just the way I like. You're just the way, just the way, just the way I like. You're just the way, just the way, just the way I like.
I like a smart girl taking chances. A Beatles t-shirt and glasses. Probably drove here in a Volvo. Got a dog in the car named Ringo. Do that weird dance I like. Throw horns while I rock the mic. You know this ain't music for the masses. You don't want no backstage passes. When the show's over, can I leave with you? We can listen to records and talk some truth. Tonight you're mine and I like it that way. My indie girl from around the way.
Baby, you're just the way, just the way, just the way I like.
Rock the mic.
You're just the way, just the way, just the way I like. You're just the way, just the way, just the way.
Welcome back, everyone. How are we feeling for the last session on the breakout stage? Lovely, thank you, thank you. So now we'll have Andrew Hong to talk about leveraging your data communities. Andrew is one of the OG in the data analytics education space. In fact, he's actually the first person that I talked to onboard me to the crypto data space. So let's give it up to Andrew.
Thank you. Testing. Is this working? It's working. Okay. Hey everyone. Wow, that's an echo. My name is Andrew Hong. Nice to see all these friendly faces here. And it's weird not talking to a camera for once. But yeah, I've been in the crypto space for a few years, mostly doing data across places like Consensus, Mirror, currently just freelancing around. And I really want to talk to you today about how you can leverage your data community, specifically if you're like a protocol or team that has just launched something and you're trying to go from 0 to 1. The right way is not just sending out 3 tweets saying there's a bounty and hoping that people will come and help you with your analytics. It's a good way to have either bad dashboards or no dashboards. So I know we're all kind of tired, but this should be a pretty lightweight, fun conversation. So I'm going to cover 3 things specifically here. Number 1 is understanding Web3 analytics pipelines. Hopefully by now you kind of understand how Dune tables work. If not, I'll still walk through that pretty quickly. Second is collaborating with Dune wizards or data wizards. There's a lot of types of wizards, and it's helpful to kind of know who to reach out to for what. And third is going to be how to make wizard lives easier. There's a lot of protocols that don't do a good job of thinking about data analysis when they're deploying protocols, and they miss events or have empty events or worse. That'll be a fun section where I just talk about do's and don'ts. So let's get into it. So Web3 analytics pipelines. I'm sure some of you have seen, I don't have a thing here. I'm sure some of you have seen this diagram, right? This is the Web2 modern data stack. It's a combination of event streaming, storing a bunch of CSV files and kind of random databases into a warehouse. And then you have some teams that hopefully make that data cleaner so that you can make your cool machine learning models and cool dashboards and whatnot. Web3, it kind of still uses the same tech underneath, but because we all use this standardized data set, we're all contributing to the same pipeline at once, right? So step 1 of that is Dune-based tables. Again, hopefully you all know this by now, but there's main tables for knowing all blocks that are mined, who's mining those blocks, when they were mined. There's contract deployments. There's event logs. Again, events are emitted whenever someone executes a transaction, like swapping on Uniswap. There's internal transactions, which is when a contract calls another contract. That data is also stored. And then there's transaction data, which is just the first level of data that you see on Etherscan whenever you've submitted a transaction. And if you've never submitted a transaction and you're trying to get into Web3, please submit a transaction first so you kind of know what you're playing with. All these are mainly connected by transaction hash, as well as other columns, but that's the main one you can think of as in terms of like, oh, how are these tables even related? And with the V2 engine, you can query across almost every EVM chain that's relevant right now, and Solana. So that's powerful, and I don't know of any other engine that lets you do that. Decoded tables, these are tables that are kind of built off of the contracts that have been submitted. Anyone can submit a contract from Etherscan, like just take the address, plug it into the decoder in your Dune profile, and the tables will populate in about a day or so. It's not magic. It's actually fairly simple, and then you can query the table just like this. It's just the name of the protocol and then the event or function that you're trying to look into, right? So these all exist as different tables. And hopefully for anyone who attended Meghan's session earlier on Spellbook, then you should know that we have these aggregated tables as well that have all NFT trades or all DEX trades across chains. And those are built up by combining various parts of decoded tables and base tables in magical ways so that we can have higher fidelity aggregated data to query off of, and that makes wizard lives easier, right? Yeah, you have labels, prices, who's holding what ERC20 or ERC721 tokens, and more. Anyone with a GitHub account can add to Spellbook. There's no kind of gatekeeping to any of this, so don't be afraid to contribute. We're all fairly nice. So that gets us back to that first diagram I was showing earlier. What's the Web3 analytics pipeline look like, right? So you have ingestions, you have bronze, silver, and gold tables, and then you have outputs, which are either API queries, ad hoc analysis, dashboards, or research and models. What's really important to note here is that this gets more and more manual and more specialized as you go left to right, and there are less wizards kind of within each specific level here and within protocol types. Which is, I think, why Web3 analytics takes a lot longer to kind of mature in some sense, because we all have to be like, oh, there's this cool new protocol that came out. There has to be at least one or two people that understand it, and then those two people have to convince the maintainers, basically, that this is the right way to add to these gold tables before it gets the output. So it's not some super simple stuff where it's like, oh, it's decoded, it should just be into the gold standard within a day, right? So hopefully that all makes sense. That's just level setting, so you kind of know what's the pipeline we're working with here. Next, I'm going to cover what kinds of wizards there are and how you can try to engage and collaborate with them. So for types of wizards, let's start with data analysis, data analysts. I think you typically have like Etherscan navigators, people who kind of know how to filter events, how to filter functions. They should be fairly familiar with Etherscan in general. I like to think of this category more as like business development, business analysts who kind of have an understanding of the protocol. They're kind of going about their day-to-day, and they just need to check things on chain once in a while. The next level above that is you have wizards, which is kind of the term we're most familiar with. They know how to work with more complex contract patterns. They should know the difference between like L1, L2 chains. They're probably SQL experts at some level. And then we get into data engineering. So RPC raters, these are people who know how to work with JSON RPC clients from different types of clients. They can work with mempool data, and they know how to kind of organize all of this data into a nice data engineering pipeline. Now you have Arch wizards, who are the ones who are contributing to Spellbook. They typically, on top of knowing how to manage complex data transformations, they typically have some sort of like protocol expertise within either like NFTs, DAOs, or DeFi. So you can basically ask them about like any protocol in their domain, and they'll basically be able to be like, oh yeah, I know that they're doing X, Y, Z. They're probably upgrading to this. This is how they're compared, and this is why like the data looks different between like LooksRare and OpenSea, or why they look exactly the same. Third one, this is kind of the most rare right now, I would say, is like the data science category. I think you have token engineers, which are people who are on the protocol team, and they not only understand the protocol well, but they also understand how to think about, okay, if the protocol does X, Y, Z, how do I use token incentives or token mechanisms to kind of tie into that? Whereas sourcers are the ones who are kind of more external, but they're helping out with various proposals in the DAO to say, hey, you might not be looking at this, but here's a reason why like your market share has decreased in like the last 2 months or so. I think a good example of this is like Alex Kruger helped out a lot on like the Uniswap proposals, I think last December or so. So you might have noticed a trend. The first level here is really usually internal, and like the teams have these on their team. And then the second level here is more external community. The skill sets are different, which is kind of like the main thing I want to highlight. because I think a lot of teams expect like, oh, the wizards or archwizards or sorcerers should be doing the internal job, or like the people they have internally, like a business analyst, should just be able to do everything that the wizard does. And it's like, not exactly, right? But they have to work together. Right, so how do they work together? So in my opinion, this is how I think the wizards, both internally and externally, work together along the pipeline, right? So for analytics engineering, you're mainly going to be relying on archwizards for like the gold level aggregations in Spellbook, and then you can probably rely on like a normal wizard for like the silver level, just like, hey, my protocol doesn't have the best event structure. I need a basic aggregation for like getting user balances every day. Can you help me with that? Oops. The rest of this, I won't go into it too much. I hope it's fairly obvious why certain wizard types are in different areas, but this kind of gives you a framework to think about it, like, oh, if I need dashboards, who do I go to? If I need like research, who do I go to, right? And hopefully one day we have like a catalog of like who fits into one structure, right? Because right now it's like mostly living in our heads, I would say, especially in the Dune community, of like, okay, which wizards know what are their expertises, what part of the pipeline do they focus on, who's out there doing the most competitions and whatnot. Reward systems. I think there's two categories of reward systems, right? One is one time, and these are either open bounties, which are like competitions that we see hosted more and more on Layer 3 XYZ, or you have private bounties, which are basically connecting with the wizard one-on-one, so you can have more back and forth for more advanced requests. And I normally don't do either of these two. The ones that I usually go for are the continuous ones. So these are ones that either have like retroactive grant committees. So a team like NounsDAO, for example, or Lil Nouns, is like, someone has a new protocol or like really cool project out there. I think it's really cool, and I want to go analyze it, and I don't want to go through a grant process. I will kind of go, well, I don't want to go through like a bounty back and forth process. I'll basically go and check like, oh, does this group have a history of retroactively giving grants and rewarding contributors? And if they don't, I'll be like, okay, that's a red flag. I might not want to contribute to them. But if they do, I'm like almost 10 times more likely to take the extra step. Be like, okay, I'll do a contribution because I know I'll probably get something, even if it takes 2-3 months for it to go through the grant committee. So that's retroactive grants. And then recurring bounties, I think, are something we'll see more and more for upkeep, especially as protocols get more complex. Because I think most of the protocols that we've seen today are like, oh, you deploy once, there aren't that many extra parameters to like change on it or to upgrade on it. It's like whatever you deploy day one is what it's going to be like for end of time, versus like a lot of the protocols we're seeing today, like SudoSwap, for example, is like they deploy with a ton of features, half of them aren't live, they leave like room for basically adding more and more functionality. So I think we're going to see more like recurring bounties where it's like, hey, there's like a monthly bounty pool that gets delegated to a bunch of contributors, and like that, we know that's going to get refilled, if that makes sense, right? So again, I've kind of tried placing these along the pipeline as well, so you kind of have an idea of like, oh, if I'm looking really quickly at like ad hoc analysis, it's probably better to have like a competition if you have like an open question, or if you just leave a question board open and just wait for people to answer it. That's probably most efficient in terms of like how wizards work. Now, this is the part I think I've been having more fun with in testing, is engaging wizards along the analytics pipeline. So again, my background is much more focused in education and like how do you get communities more engaged along things, more so than, like, I think a lot of the wizards here have contributed more than me when it comes to like creating dashboards or stuff in Spellbook. So I think typically we have protocols go from releases to documentation to research, and then they try to just basically go in that tight cycle slowly. But I think we can basically make things more efficient by adding steps in between, right? So if you just released a new protocol, it's not a good idea to just be like, hey, this protocol is out there a week ago. Here's a competition. Have at it. The competition ends in a month. And like, no one understands your protocol. The documentation around it is probably not trash, minimal. And like, no, there's like not enough activity to even ask good questions, right? So I think like a good engagement cycle is like your protocol is just released, go have someone do like education about it and kind of go through it, explain things from like a data analyst perspective, so that one, you have better documentation to work with. And two, it's like, oh, as someone like, normally as I go through like the education process, I'll contribute to Spellbook to be like, okay, I kind of have a better understanding of the protocol. I can make some either user-generated views or like highly aggregated like NFT trade views to kind of make things easier so that now when you do like what I like to call a scavenger hunt versus a competition, when you do a scavenger hunt, people have stuff to work off of, right? They can immediately be like, hey, oh, I can learn about this protocol through this video, or oh, this documentation isn't just like this function does this and this function does that. It's like, oh, here's how the data is tied, you know, and they have Spellbook tables to kind of work off of. That's, at the very least, you're going to get more bang for your buck that way. I think then that's a good way to get more niche dashboards instead of everyone just doing TVL. And that means you'll have better questions and insights that you can then go and do focused research on through like DAO proposals, rather than like waiting for your TVL to drop and then being like, we need to research what's going on here. Do we add fees or do we pump the token? You know, I think there's like a lot more testing that can be done there in that cycle. I'm personally focused on the orange parts there. If any protocol teams out there need help, feel free to reach out to me, and I'm happy to try and figure something out there for us. My contact's at the end, I think. Okay, that was a lot. We can come back to that later, but this will be more of the fun section. How to make wizards' lives easier, because wizards' lives are not very easy right now. It's like basically being a second citizen in the crypto world. Everyone's just like, oh, cool dashboards. And it's like, well, like I cried while reading someone's Solidity one time. So especially right when you launch. So making well-defined events. I'm not going to even go into functions because like I get that functions, you have other considerations to make in terms of like what variables you return and take in. But at the very least, when you're doing events, please don't emit empty events, right? Again, for all the protocols that I do cover in this, I love you, and it's fine, but like don't do this again. I feel like a parent, but I think when I see an empty event, it's like, what is the phrase? Like every time there's an empty event, a baby somewhere dies, is kind of how I think of it. And you should think of it with that seriousness as well. I think like I've seen this happen a few times, and I asked the protocol developers, and they're like, oh, but emitting events has like a tiny bit of gas. And I'm like, look, that's like 2 cents you might be saving per transaction on the protocol level, but that's like permanent extra compute cost and like analyst tiers that you're costing over time. So please, like for swaps, for examples, you should have any prices or rates, any tokens, and any starting and any balances should be emitted, especially if you have any sort of complex calculations. Just emit them. There's no reason for you not to. Like, there's literally no reason. Second, if you use events for more than one type of action or function, it should be easy to attribute where that came from. Again, this is pseudo-swap. They have spot price update, which is like every time there's a swap, the price updates based on like whatever the price of the pool is. But within those contracts, the owner of the pool can also change the price at any time, right? So if I'm only looking at events, I don't know if a price changed because the owner changed it or if because like someone actually swapped a token at that price, right? And like, again, that makes things really confusing to read through, and that's extra logic that we now have to consider from like the data pipeline perspective. Like you could either do this as different events or just add a second variable that says like owner changed or swapped. Like it's not it's not that hard. Cool. Having event coverage and adherence to standards. We have hopefully. Does everyone here know what Open Zeppelin is? Kind of? Okay, so Open Zeppelin, they've done a ton of token standards in terms of ERC20s, ERC721s, ERC1155s, and a few others. Though 2020, in this year of 2022, we still have people creating their own ERC20 implementations, which is fine. Like, if you want to be fancy with it, I get it. There's one team that's famous for this, and that's Compound, their original ERC20 token that did delegation, which is cool. But their newest one, they have essentially a transfer event where no transfer, or like they have a transfer function where no transfer event is emitted. And when I talked to them about it, they were like, oh, but if you call balance of, the balance is correct. And I'm like, well, yes, but like even on Etherscan, it's not showing the tokens are transferred. You know, it's like if every protocol did this and we had to think about custom ways of constructing transfer events, like the data would not flow anymore. You know, like anyways, so at the very least, if you're playing with a token standard that's out there, please make sure you have good event coverage, at least on the transfer events, because I think like we're only going to get more and more complex tokens out there. So like best case is you just inherit ERC20, like best case. But if you have to do custom, have good coverage. All right, basic documentation starts from NatSpec. NatSpec is, well, it's in the next example because this one doesn't have NatSpec. But it's basically the documentation you have on top of functions and events that tells you what that function event does, what each of the variables are. Right. On the left here, we have the infamous maker contracts where the functions and the variables make no sense. Like, does anyone have a guess of what function kick does? It's a liquidation function for your maker vaults. And their function naming is unclear, and they have no documentation about what that function does. Thankfully, we haven't seen something this atrocious recently. But a great example of someone doing things well is Uniswap, I think, has consistently had the best NatSpec and documentation, both on the contract and off the contract. So like, big kudos to them for making our lives easier in general. Everyone should have this. Ideally, you have this in an interface. So for people who don't know like Solidity contract patterns that well, right now people like to define like all the functions and events that are like key to a contract in this like interface, which basically has no logic. It's just defining the functions, and then you inherit them in the main contract, which has like much longer logic. So like the interface is like a summary. So you should put the description about what your functions events do in the summary. It's just intuitive. But again, Uniswap does a great job of that, and I think like a lot of protocols do a good job of that. But that would be nice. This one's like a heavier ask. I think a lot of protocols, when they do documentation, they think of things as like, oh, if I define all the functions and if I define all the events, people will figure it out, you know. But like one of the hard parts about being a data analyst is like figuring out like, okay, there's some user state, like how much they've borrowed, that we want to track, and like I have no idea which functions are going to change that state or which events help me track that changing of states. And I'd say like one of the most time-consuming things for me as an analyst is just basically taking each variable that I want to represent and figuring out like, oh, this function will change it this way, this function will change it this way. There might be an edge case here where like the math doesn't check out, or like the math has like an overflow, so they cut it off, so that doesn't actually happen, even though the function was called and it continues to run. So stuff like that is helpful. I like to think of terms of like, you have contract patterns, and then you have like the liquidity or ownership management under those patterns, and then how that ties into like the token and user states. So you can kind of think of it as like a tree flow of like, if you're explaining some function, you should talk about like the contract patterns from how it affects overall liquidity and how it affects token user states. Because for some protocols, like Aave v3, for example, the storage contracts are like kind of spread out, and they're like fairly hard to start tracking down, like, oh, the user state is here, the pool state's over here. There's indexes that are like kind of tied across structs. And it's not helpful to just be like, borrow, mints a USDC if you put USDC in. You know, it's like that. That doesn't give me the full picture. I tried doing some documentation around this for like pseudoswap, for example, where it's like, there's some main interaction. There's the functions and events that are like tied to it. And then there's like traces and transactions, which we can use to kind of proxy data that's missing. There's definitely better and more creative ways to represent this than a grid, but you know, we start somewhere. And I get that this also takes extra time. So this kind of goes into like the protocol education thing, where it's like, you've deployed something, you need help, just reach out to a wizard or me. And like, I will literally help you do this so that we can make everyone else's lives easier. So, oh, last big thing here is there should be some way to access the BD team or the developers to ask clarifying questions. If I have to ask in the general help section of a Discord right after you've released, along with everyone else asking, like, the UI's not working, when token, like, we're not going to get very far. So, last one, fifth thing. I think this is like another nice to have, and I think most protocols do a good job of this. Is contract deployments are not always very straightforward, especially for like initialization of anything in DeFi. Compound Comet did do a good job of basically saying, hey, there's 7 transactions that were executed at deployment. Here's what each of those transactions do. Here's links to like the discussion around how the thought process behind each function call was decided upon. Like risk parameters, for example, like how much of each token to have as like a supply cap. Like they nicely link to the discussion around that alongside the proposal for deploying the contract. And like that's really nice, because otherwise I'm kind of sitting there not knowing like, oh, if I'm just looking on Etherscan, I just see a bunch of numbers. I don't know why those numbers exist, and it's easy for me to miss something. And again, going back to like protocols in the last few years that were deployed were simple, and the protocols being deployed now are just going to get more and more complex. It should be easy to figure out what features are live at both like a protocol and front-end level, so that I can know like, oh, okay, like these extra 5 contracts here, I don't have to worry about until like maybe 2 months out, you know, rather than, again, like being a data analyst is a lot of thinking about edge cases. Like if something's not live and you can tell me that up front, that saves me a lot of mental space. So that was a lot. I don't know if I lost everyone or if I've kept some people, but this was a guide on how to take your protocol team's relationship with the data community from 0 to 1. Like that's just 0 to 1. I think like a lot of the stuff you saw today from like Uniswap and Lido and whatnot, like they're already going like 1 to 100. And like you can't think of things as like, oh, I want that. I'm going to go hire a wizard to do all of that. You know, it's like, no, you have to take the 0 to 1 step of like understanding how these engagement loops work, of making wizards' lives easier, of understanding what kind of wizards to reach out to, and like how it all contributes and comes back to like the Web3 data analytics pipeline to kind of get your team to that level. So that's all. Oh yeah, reach out to me at Andrew Hong 5297 on Twitter, Telegram, or Gmail for any inquiries or partnerships. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. Any questions? Well, that was really nice. Oh.
What was the worst protocol you've had to work with the data with?
What was the worst protocol? Are we still live streaming?
No, we're offline. I took the stream offline.
Let's see. I'm trying to remember.
And why was it pseudo swap?